Hello, Hammers! Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned so you're always up to date with the biggest Hammers stories. The central point is clear and direct. Once again, there are strong signs that West Ham may be moving towards a genuine change of ownership, and that shifts the entire atmosphere surrounding the club. The topic has gained momentum because several pieces of this puzzle have begun to move at the same time. And when that happens, supporters naturally feel that distinct jolt, that sense that something significant might be approaching. Even knowing that things with West Ham are rarely straightforward, the truth is that this time there is a combination of factors that makes everything feel warmer, more believable, and genuinely exciting for those who have spent years under the same board and the same limitations. Everything starts with the discussion around the London Stadium and the possibility of new owners negotiating not only the club's purchase, but also the control of the ground. For a long time, the future of the arena has been a point of debate, and every time a hint emerges that fresh ownership might revisit the whole stadium question, supporters immediately tune in, because that changes absolutely everything. The stadium has become a symbol of an era, a promise of growth that never fully materialized, a place that still feels borrowed, marked by areas showing signs of neglect, debate over its layout, its Olympic legacy, its suitability for football, and its financial sustainability. Whenever someone mentions the prospect of rebuilding it, or even tearing it down and constructing a new one on the same footprint, it captures the imagination of anyone who attends matches and has always felt the place was never truly ours. At the same time, the conversation about its real cost resurfaces. The presenter recalls the figures quoted by critics such as Simon Jordan, who suggested astronomical sums for a redevelopment, something in the range of several billions. But others point to examples like the projected new Inter and AC Milan stadium, expected to cost around $1 billion, or the Hill Dickinson Stadium, which came close to $800 million. These comparisons show that, while expensive, the project would not necessarily resemble the monstrous $3 billion estimate some propose. And if the surrounding land offers wide unused areas, with an abandoned warm-up track and room for hotels, retail spaces, and business buildings, it all becomes an attractive opportunity for any investor with vision. This alone places West Ham at a different level of appeal in the global market. And that leads to a name that has become central in the entire conversation: Albert "Trip" Smith. He is an investor who did not buy his shares out of romance or club loyalty, but with the mindset of someone experienced in major operations. He holds somewhere between 8 and 10% of the club and works specifically on the sort of negotiations involving huge purchases, complex assets, and billion-pound deals. He is exactly the type of figure who appears behind the scenes when something serious might be approaching. And when the presenter points out that Smith has been spending far more time in the United Kingdom than usual, visiting frequently, touring club facilities, and, according to rumors, even showing the training ground to potential buyers, it naturally raises eyebrows. Someone of his profile does not travel without purpose. He moves when there is business on the table, full stop. This movement becomes even more striking when we remember that Daniel Kshetinsky also entered the club as an investor rather than a lifelong supporter. People like them do not buy pieces of a Premier League club to remain inactive. They want return, value, and growth. And when they see an environment becoming unstable, protests, public pressure, negative results, and a board losing support, the natural response is to consider big strategic moves, selling, restructuring, or facilitating new ownership that can restore momentum and strengthen the asset they hold. And as if that were not enough to intensify suspicion, the mayor of London himself enters the discussion. In recent comments, he openly stated that he would be willing to discuss the stadium's future if West Ham had new owners. The sentence may appear simple, but its implications are heavy. He has no obligation to address this matter, let alone express openness. When someone in his position allows such a comment to slip, it suggests he is aware of conversations taking place behind the scenes. And that reinforces the sense that something genuine is unfolding. Looking back, every time West Ham approached a moment of significant change, similar signs appeared. Investors more present, political noise, renewed debate around the stadium, journalists picking up the narrative more often, and supporters growing increasingly restless. This time, all those elements appear simultaneously, almost as if following a script already seen but now more convincing and more mature. For a club that has lived through repeated promises, recycled statements, and years of frustration, this alignment alone is enough to ignite a spark of hope that something big may finally be on the horizon. This first section of the original content makes one thing clear. We are not dealing with isolated rumors, but with a collection of movements that, when put together, point towards the greatest structural shift at West Ham in many years. And that is why so many supporters feel the atmosphere changing, as though something is close, something capable of altering not only the boardroom, but the entire future direction of the club. Before we carry on, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. This is really important because it strengthens the Claret and Blue family, making our West Ham bigger and stronger every day. If the first section sets the pieces on the board, the second deepens the sense that there is a coordinated, quiet, but very real movement taking place around West Ham. And when we start examining all the details orbiting this moment, it becomes clear that this is not merely hopeful supporters or recycled rumors. There is, in fact, a sequence of pressures, interests, and circumstances forming the ideal environment for an ownership change to finally take shape. The most striking element is the accumulated effect of supporter pressure. For a long time, isolated protests appeared here and there, but they never reached the scale required to disrupt what truly matters: the board's public image and the way the club is perceived by investors. Now, though, the pressure has grown. Marches, debates on national programs, live broadcasts showing supporters remaining in the stadium after the final whistle, all of it has gained visibility that has not been seen since the most turbulent periods of the previous era. And when the entire country begins hearing about West Ham's unrest, it directly affects how external investors view the club as an asset. At the same time, David Sullivan and Karen Brady find themselves under a spotlight they no longer control. Regardless of explanations or public statements, the damage has passed the point of no return. Their names are now tied to protests, banners, hashtags, interviews, and criticism, creating exactly the kind of environment corporate investors despise. Figures such as Trip Smith and Daniel Kretinsky, who see the club through a financial lens, do not want to be attached to this turbulence. From this sort of public erosion arise the backstage movements that matter: pressure for departures, restructuring, sales of shares, or new alliances designed to protect personal investment. And this is precisely why Trip Smith's behavior has become even more significant. Investors do not increase their presence in the country where they hold shares without reason. He certainly would not visit for 2 consecutive months, especially in a moment of sporting and institutional crisis, unless following a clear agenda. When he appears in person, walking through Rush Green, showing the training ground to unidentified individuals and attending meetings far beyond his formal role, that is not routine. That is strategy. This interpretation strengthens when we consider the wider context of English football. There is a clear movement of American groups expanding their reach. It is a corporate, aggressive model, growing because the Premier League is seen as the most valuable sporting asset in the world. Many of these investors envision a future without relegation, a Premier League 1 and a Premier League 2 functioning as a closed conference. If that vision materializes, acquiring an established top-flight club becomes even more strategic. Within that logic, West Ham stands out as a rare opportunity: a large fan base, a valuable market, a stadium open to negotiation, and enormous potential for brand expansion. Alongside this comes the most symbolic part: the physical state of the London Stadium. This is not just an aesthetic matter. When supporters see the exterior warm-up track dirty, with grass growing through cracks, with equipment abandoned, it conveys something deeper. It shows that the arena has no true owner, no one treating it as a priority, no one providing the basic care a home deserves. This affects the club's identity. It is like entering your house and realizing the roof leaks, yet no one bothers to fix it. And when the mayor openly states he would discuss the stadium's future if new owners arrived, he is, intentionally or not, opening a door that should not be opened lightly. It is a signal, and this is where the tone shifts. It is no longer simply about wanting new owners. It becomes a matter of observing how political, financial, sporting, and social conditions surrounding the club are aligned in a way that seldom happens. It feels as though several different lines are converging at the same point. Restless investors, furious supporters, an unpopular board, political openness, a deteriorating stadium, corporate interest from abroad. This is not coincidence. This is a scenario forming. Within this scenario, supporters naturally begin to dream. Dream of modernization, planning, a stadium that genuinely feels like home, a refreshed atmosphere, a board focused on growth instead of managing crisis after crisis. Though caution remains, and rightly so, the sensation of change becomes tangible. The excitement increases because even from afar, the potential feels real. And when West Ham reaches this stage, the entire supporter base feels it. Before we carry on, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. This is really important because it strengthens the Claret and Blue family, making our West Ham bigger and stronger every day. When the discussion reaches its final stage, everything gains a broader, almost reflective tone, because we are no longer talking only about negotiations, visits, political statements, or backstage rumors. We are talking about what it means, emotionally, to see West Ham standing before a genuine possibility of transformation after so many years walking in circles. It becomes almost impossible for supporters not to imagine how the club might change under new ownership, and that imagination takes on a life of its own, because for the first time in a long while, there is a consistent set of factors supporting this hope. It is striking how the relationship between supporters and the club has deteriorated over the years. Not out of a lack of love, but out of a lack of reciprocity. The feeling of abandonment did not arise from a single bad season, but from a constant repetition of incomplete promises, questionable decisions, and choices that always seemed out of touch with ordinary supporters. The stadium is a symbol of that disconnect. It carries the grandeur of an Olympic venue, yet the coldness of a space never truly designed to belong to a football club. And when people look around and see neglected surroundings, structures that should represent legacy, but now resemble remnants of a project that lost its purpose, the sense that West Ham deserves more becomes unavoidable. This is why the idea of new owners is not viewed merely as an administrative swap, but as the beginning of a possible emotional reconstruction. A chance to redefine what the club aims to be. A team determined to compete with the elite, or one resigned to simply surviving? A team that wants a real home, or an arena that constantly reminds supporters of an event from over a decade ago? A club with leadership that listens to supporters or executives shielded from the consequences of deeply unpopular decisions? These are questions that have hovered over West Ham for years, and now, with all these movements happening simultaneously, it feels like they might finally receive different answers. There is also the reflection on what new ownership would mean in a moment when world football is changing at unprecedented speed. The sport's globalization, the rise of corporate groups, the explosion in broadcasting revenue. All of this places clubs like West Ham in a delicate position. Standing still means losing ground. Moving forward means growth. And when the narrator highlights how American investors view the Premier League, it is not mere speculation. There is a worldwide trend turning clubs into business platforms, global brands. This can be a worry or a hope, depending on who takes over and what vision they choose to pursue. But the most compelling aspect of this forward-looking perspective is that for the first time in a long time, it breaks the sense of limbo. West Ham has often existed in an awkward middle ground. Too big to be small, too small to be big. That identity has charm, but it also restricts ambition. The arrival of new owners offers a horizon where that identity could be expanded, where thinking big is not a punchline but a strategy, where decisions are made proactively instead of reactively, where West Ham can look ahead without constantly carrying the shadow of almost. Perhaps this is what makes the current moment feel so different. There is no guarantee that change will happen, no official announcement, no confirmed figures. But there is something impossible to ignore, an alignment of circumstances that seldom appears at the same time. Nationally visible supporter unrest, political openness, a stadium showing physical decay, investors circulating, a market hungry for opportunities. When all these elements coexist, imagination naturally accelerates. And for the first time in years, it accelerates upwards rather than downwards. In the end, everything comes down to that unmistakable feeling. The air around the club is different. It feels like West Ham has reached one of those rare instances where something must happen, whether because the environment has become unsustainable, or because the market pushes in that direction, or because the club itself demands evolution. And when supporters sense this, it is not just emotion, it is instinct, context, memory of all the stagnant years contrasted with the current moment in which nothing feels still. And there is something genuinely moving in realizing that despite all the weariness, the supporters' fire remains alive. The ability to dream of better days, of a true home, of a board aligned with the spirit of the club, of ambitions matching the size of the fan base, none of that has faded. It was simply dormant, waiting for a moment like this to awaken again. And when that hope returns, it comes back stronger because it now arrives with context, signals, and a collective sense that history itself is demanding change. No one knows whether it will happen quickly, no one knows whether it will happen at all, but something is moving beneath the surface. And when so many pieces begin sliding in the same direction, it becomes difficult to believe this is all random. West Ham stands on the edge of one of those moments that can define an entire generation of supporters, and it is impossible not to feel a blend of anxiety, curiosity, and excitement about what lies beyond the next curve. So that's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, share, and of course subscribe to the channel for more. Take care, and I'll see you next time.